Namaste all, and welcome to our continuing series of essays on the Gita. Today we begin a new chapter, Chapter 6, Man and the Battle of Life, as always with our beloved Ranga, who is looking very, very strong today.
Pardon?
You're looking very strong today.
Wow. Well, we are reading about ahimsa and
Exactly.
violence.
Exactly.
Man and the battle of life. So, as we were discussing last time, one of the big problems for moral people to understand the Gita is Sri Krishna is actually encouraging Arjuna to kill. And killing in any form is bad, is crime. So that's the problem, which is the Gita. And Sri Aurobindo is therefore taking 3 chapters to explain that it is not violence or killing that is the bad thing, but the attitude behind with which you are doing. Of course, it's perfectly all right to kill when you are attacked by somebody. So it's very, very obvious in self-defense. But even sometimes you are asked to do something, to destroy something. So destruction and construction always go together in this physical world at the lowest level. Now that's a very interesting thing, and we will discuss that a little bit before we proceed to the chapter. In the manifestation, the one divine becomes the many here. This one principle you remember. There are several things which you, if you remember, many things become very clear. The one becoming the many, the formless taking form, okay? The consciousness becoming unconscious here, the infinite becoming finite.
Was seemingly unconscious.
Seemingly, but it depends at what level we are, and at each level we see things in a different way. Mm-hmm. So this, if you remember, the one becoming the many here, the many is divine being infinite, he creates the many infinitely. So therefore, you get 2 extremes opposites. So if there is kindness, there is also cruelty. If there is hot, there is cold. These are what you call the dualities in the physical world. So there is also creation, but there is also destruction.
And this is nature's work.
Yes. And you can see this in nature all the time. Mm-hmm. And when nature is destroying, she is not doing it with evil intent. So destruction has to be taken not in a sense of negative or pejorative sense, but it's a process of nature. It is neither good nor bad. It's a process of nature. This is the thing. You can also see the food chain. The higher species is always feeding itself on the lower. It is something that goes on like that. Okay, so this is one thing that you have to understand. There is another way of looking at it. If there are dualities here, and there are some things which are not perfect, if you want perfection, you have to destroy the imperfect and go to the perfect. So destruction becomes necessary here. Now that's a very interesting thing, because just the other day, or was it yesterday, I was reading Sri Aurobindo's one letter, and he says very clearly, and it is really eye-opening. He says that destruction is necessary here. Even in yoga, when you are doing, you have to destroy that which is negative in you, and then you can go up only when you destroy something negative in you. You have to eliminate evil, you have to eliminate unconsciousness, and sometimes you have to do it very drastically. You have to eliminate also ego, you have to eliminate unconsciousness, ignorance, all these things have to be destroyed. So long as you are in the lower planes of consciousness, destruction is essential. But what if you have reached a plane of consciousness where there is no more evil? Surprisingly, destruction disappears.
It disappears.
This is a very interesting thing. Therefore, in the supramental plane of consciousness, where a man will become a supramental being, there is no destruction there. It's very interesting. So destruction is absolutely essential here, and as you keep going up, it becomes less and less important, and destruction also can become psychological, It can also, even here also, we can have a violent feeling of anger or hatred for somebody. Even in the mind, we can destroy other people's opinions. There are so many different ways of doing it. So, this is why Sri Aurobindo is so keen on explaining that ahimsa is not an absolute principle. The moment you say that ahimsa is an absolute principle, you are wrong. It has got a relative truth. There is no doubt about it. Okay? So.
And I remember reading a letter of Sri Aurobindo where they were asking him, if you cannot kill anything, what about these insects, mosquitoes that bite you? And he says, that's perfectly fine.
Yeah. Because there is a certain value. It is not the killing itself that is important, but the attitude with which you are doing.
The way you do it, yes.
That's right. Now, when I kill somebody with anger or rancor or hate, okay, or a dislike, that is the thing to be eliminated. Not the act itself, but the attitude with which you are doing. So suppose I have to fight a war, okay, and I have been commanded to do that. Okay. There are some people, of course, who take conscientious objection. They say, no, it's wrong in principle, so I won't do. And normally the state allows this sort of people not to go to war. But if you think that you have to do the good for your nation, and if the enemy is very a hostile force, then you have to stand up and fight for your nation. When you kill, you're not hating your enemy. It's just an act of... You can, of course, introduce hatred into it, but you need not. There are very interesting stories in the Second World War, or was it the First World War? I don't remember. The Germans and the Allies were facing each other. The next day was Christmas.
Yes, I remember.
You remember that incident?
Second World War.
They came together and celebrated Christmas that day, no war, and then they went back. So this is the first thing I wanted to say, that there is no destruction at the higher level. It is quite a revelation. It's not that construction and revelation will go on right up to the end. Destruction in this sense will not be there.
Even in the second level?
In the second level it is there.
It is there, yes.
The second level means the spiritual planes of consciousness.
Spiritual
yeah, because
planes.
you're not perfect at all.
Right.
When you are rising from the higher mind to the illumined mind, intuitive mind, you have to make progress. You have to still remove some of the negative things in yourself. This is the first thing. Then the second thing is, my friend from Sweden, he gave me the reference to that passage which you read the other day, and I said, I don't know what it is. So he sent me. I could have also done a Google search, but I didn't. And he has done it for me. So I'll just tell you what it was. And that also brings up an interesting question. I'm reading out the quotation, then I'll tell you. This Sri Aurobindo is quoting in the Gita, in the essays on the Gita. Thou shalt not conquer except by battle with thy fellows and thy surroundings. Thou shalt not even live except by battle and struggle and by absorbing into thyself other life. The first law of this world that I have made is creation and preservation by destruction. This is the quote that Sri Aurobindo is given here, and we are wondering what, because he has put it in double quotes. So this statement appears to be a quote from the book, the Book of the Law. That's the name of the book. Or maybe it's in Latin, so I won't read that, which is a central text of Thelema or something like that, Thelema, a spiritual and philosophical system founded by Aleister Crowley.
Yes, I know about Aleister Crowley.
Yeah?
Oh, yes, very much.
I never heard of him.
Deeply into occultism.
Pardon?
Deeply into occultism.
Yes, that's right. And he was born in 1875, Royal Leamington, England, died in December 1947, quite recently. He is a British occultist, writer, and mountaineer who was a practitioner of magic, spelt with a CK, as he used to pronounce it. And he called himself the Beast 666. He used to call himself. He was denounced in his own time for his decadent lifestyle and had few followers, not many. But he became a cult figure after his death. So this is the chap, and Sri Aurobindo is quoting him. Now, the interesting part is, that brings me to that other question of Sri Aurobindo's reading. Immense amount of reading. Even when he was in England as a student, he did not do his homeworks or things like that. He didn't do. He used to go to the library and start reading books. So, and when he was in Baroda, he used to order trunk loads of books.
Yes.
So I used to wonder, where have all those trunk loads of books gone to? Okay. So again, I was reading 2 or 3 days ago something, and it is said that when he shifted from Baroda to Calcutta to carry on the freedom movement, all his books he donated to the National University, which is now Kharagpur. No, not Kharagpur. Jadavpur University. So he gave, and he was the principal or president or something like that. I've forgotten, but he was a leader there, and all his books he gave away there. So in Pondicherry, hardly any books that he had read earlier, all in Calcutta.
I did ask Amal one time, did you ever give Sri Aurobindo any books? And he says, yes, I gave him Palgrave's Golden Treasury. All the poems, collected poems.
And he also gave him a pen, a valuable pen. And he asked Sri Aurobindo, how is it? So Sri Aurobindo said, it's a very good pen. It's very thin. In his handwriting in the archives, I used to work in the archives. Very thin, fine pen he used to have. People used to donate to him dhotis and very fine quality dhotis and pen and materials like that.
And the lady would make him ladus.
Eh?
Ladus.
Yeah.
That lady, who's I thought mother didn't like her too much. And wasn't she the one who died and had Sri Aurobindo's symbol on her forehead?
Yeah.
Incredible
That was
story.
revealed by Champaklal, that those who die here in the ashram, they are taken under the protection of Sri Aurobindo. Their soul is stamped with Sri Aurobindo's symbol.
And mother actually saw that symbol on that lady and she said, her too? And then Sri Aurobindo answered. Wow.
So,
well, let's go to
now
man
we start
and the battle of life.
Chapter 6, Man and the Battle of Life. Thus, if we are to appreciate in its Catholicity the teaching of the Gita, we must accept intellectually its standpoint and courageous envisaging of the manifest nature and process of the world. The divine charioteer of Kurukshetra reveals himself on one side as the Lord of all the worlds and the friend and omniscient guide of all creatures. On the other, as Time the destroyer, arisen for the destruction of these peoples. The Gita, following in this the spirit of the Catholic Hindu religion, affirms this also as God. It does not attempt to evade the enigma of the world by escaping from it through a side door. If, in fact, we do not regard existence merely as the mechanic action of a brute and indifferent material force, or, on the other hand, as an equally mechanical play of ideas and energies arising out of an original non-existence, or else reflected in the passive soul of the evolution of a dream or nightmare in the surface consciousness of an indifferent, immutable transcendence, which is unaffected by the dream and has no real part in it, if we accept at all, as the Gita accepts, the existence of God, that is to say, of the omnipresent, omniscient, omnipotent, right? Omnipotent, yet always transcendent being who manifests the world and himself in the world, who is not the slave but the lord of his creative consciousness, nature or force, Maya, Prakriti or Shakti, who is not baffled or thwarted in his world conception or design by his creatures, man or devil, who does not need to justify himself by shifting the responsibility for any part of his creation or manifestation on that which is created or manifested. Then the human being has to start from a difficult act of faith, finding himself in a world which is apparently a chaos of battling powers, a clash of vast and obscure forces, a life which subsists only by constant change and death, menaced from every side by pain, suffering, evil and destruction. He has to see the omnipresent deity in it all, and conscious that of this enigma there must be a solution, and beyond this ignorance in which he dwells, a knowledge that reconciles. He has to take his stand upon this faith. Though thou slay me, yet I will trust in thee. All human thought or faith that is active and affirmative, whether it be theistic, pantheistic, or atheistic, does in fact involve more or less explicitly and completely such an attitude. It admits and it believes, admits the discords of the world, believes in some highest principle of God, universal being or nature, which shall enable us to transcend, overcome, harmonize these discords, perhaps even to do all three at once, to harmonize by overcoming and transcending. Sri Aurobindo's very condensed language, and we have to unravel what he's saying. Each thing we'll try and give an example of what he's saying so that we understand what he's saying exactly. Basically what he's saying in the para is that all the problems that you face in the world, okay, suffering, pain, evil, falsehood, killing, destruction, there's an explanation to it. And it is the divine himself who is doing it. It's not somebody else. Out of a vital weakness and our eagerness to protect the divine and say that he doesn't do anything wrong, because these are all moral ideas. He is not doing anything wrong. All the things that you see negative in the physical world is created by some other force, not the divine.
So, what is the fate of all these religions?
Pardon?
What is the fate of all these religions who profess that it's the devil?
The faith is that everything is divine, and however undivine appear these things in the physical world, there must be an explanation to it. I will not accept that there is another force than the divine. In other words, the faith in the Advaita philosophy. Advaita, there is nothing else except the divine. Okay? Ekameva dvitiyam. Ekameva advitiyam. There is nothing else except the divine. And what is the nature of the divine? Sat, Chit, Shakti, Ananda. This is the reality. And when it is manifesting itself, we just now spoke earlier, that the infinite becomes the finite, the perfect becomes the imperfect, seeming to become the imperfect. So even the imperfect, why it is so, there's surely an explanation. I have faith that I will understand one day. That's what you have to understand. Thus, if we are to appreciate in its Catholicity the teaching of the Gita, and it is so wide the teaching that everything that you see here seeming to be undivine is really divine. You are not seeing it in the right way. You go to another level of consciousness, you will see it in the right way. Okay. We must accept intellectually its standpoint and courageous envisaging of the manifest nature and process of the world. Okay? So, there is, the dualities are there, that's a process of the world. The one becomes the many, and the many are infinite and often opposites. Mostly, even science accepts this fact, okay, in different words. To every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. So, the opposites are always there, these are the dualities. As you keep climbing in consciousness higher and higher, these dualities don't seem to be opposites, but they are complementary aspects of each other. Like light and darkness, they are opposites for us. But if you see carefully, light is diminishing itself, making itself less and less, veiling its power, becoming less. Finally, it becomes darkness. So, darkness is really light which has hidden itself. So that
or
is
diminished itself.
Yeah, it diminishes and becomes.
Yes.
This is what you have to begin. You have to begin with this faith that everything is divine. How? Intellectually you have to accept, and then the explanation will be given later on. The divine charioteer of Kurukshetra reveals himself on one side as a lord of all the worlds and the friend and omniscient guide of all creatures. On the other, as time the destroyer, arisen for the destruction of these peoples. He is put in double quotes because he is translating the Sanskrit.
It's from the Gita.
Yeah.
Directly.
Chapter 11, verse 32. Okay. Kalosmi, I am Kala. Kala is the time the destroyer. Okay. Lokakshayakrit pravriddho. Lokan, I have not written it very clearly, so I won't. But it is Kalosmi, I am time the destroyer. Okay, so that's what it is. And then he is telling Arjuna that even without you, okay, kritopi tvam na bhavishyanti sarve ye avasthita here. Those who are here, your enemies, even without you, they will be killed by me. Because I am time the destroyer. So he is explaining to Arjuna that you are only an instrument.
And doesn't he say also, I have already killed them?
Yes, that's right. They are already dead in the higher planes of consciousness. So, so on the one side, he is the kind person. On the other side, he is a destroyer. This is again, it's interesting, but this is not, it's not only the Gita which has seen that. Even William Blake, the tiger, that poem on tiger. Tiger, tiger, burning bright in the forests of the night. If you remember.
What immortal hand or eye?
Yeah, that's right.
Form thy fearful symmetry.
Yeah, that's right. And then the line, did he who make the lamb make thee?
Yeah.
He's created such a sweet, simple lamb, image of sweetness and beauty. And has he also made you, fearful creature that you are? So this is the same problem being dealt with. Catholic religion, Hindu religion. It is known that he is saying Catholic because we might just touch briefly upon it. In most of the Abrahamic religions, they start with a belief. You can go only through Christ for liberation. It's a dogma. They begin with a dogma. And even in Islam also you have the same idea. It is Allah who has created and there is nobody else except Allah. If you call him Brahman, he is not existent. If you call him something else, he doesn't exist. Only Allah exists. So these are all fixed ideas. But in India, you are encouraged to discover for yourself. That's why yoga was invented. Find out for yourself. If you found out that he is this, fine. If you find out that he is that, fine. So that's why there is a proliferation of religions in India, and all are tolerated, and there are discussions between them. That's why he's using the word Catholic Hindu religion. Okay. The Gita, following in the spirit of the Catholic Hindu religion, affirms this also as God. What is this? The destruction.
Mm-hmm.
The destruction also that also is God. It does not attempt to evade the enigma of the world by escaping from it through a side door. This is what Christianity also does to a certain extent, and Islam also. Many religions do that. All the wrong things in the physical world created by the devil, not the divine. So he is not the one single. There are two opposites. God is doing all the good things, and there's someone else doing the bad things. So you're escaping from a side door. Okay, so if in fact we do not regard existence merely as the mechanic action of a brute and indifferent material force, what's he talking about? We are going step by step. Okay, if in fact we do not regard existence merely as a mechanic action of a brute and indifferent material force. He is talking of materialism. So if we are not a materialist, that's what he means. Okay. Or on the other hand, as an equally mechanical play of ideas and energies arising out of an original non-existence, okay, or else reflected in the passive soul of the evolution of a dream or nightmare. We'll have to go step by step. Okay. So first is, if you are not a materialist. Secondly, he's saying, or else, on the other
mechanical play.
Or on the other hand, as an equally mechanical play of ideas and energies arising out of an original non-existence. There is the Mayavada theory and also the Buddhistic theory. There is something called non-existence, okay, out of which existence comes out. And this existence is not real. So he is referring to that. Even if you are not a materialist or not a Buddhist, that's what he's meaning, or a Mayavadin, okay, that's what he's saying in different words. He's describing the Mayavadin and the Buddhist. Or on the other hand, as an equally mechanical play of ideas and energies arising out of an original non-existence, or else reflected in the passive soul or the evolution of a dream or nightmare in the surface consciousness of an indifferent, immutable transcendence, which is unaffected by the dream and has no real part in it. If we accept at all, as the Gita accepts, the existence of God, that is to say, he's explaining the term God, of the omnipresent, omniscient, omnipotent, yet always transcendent being, who manifests the world and himself in the world, who is not the slave but the lord of his creative consciousness. Creative consciousness is nature. So nature or force, Maya, Prakriti, Shakti, we'll discuss that. Who is not baffled or thwarted by his world conception or design by his creatures, man or devil, who does not need to justify himself by shifting the responsibility for any part of his creation or manifestation on that which is created or manifested, then the human being has to start from a difficult act of faith. This is a typical Indian Sri Lankan sentence.
Very long.
We would have made 10 sentences out of this. If you are a materialist, if you are not a materialist, then you have a faith. If you are not a Mayavadin, then you can start with this faith. If you are not a Sankhya follower, then you can do this. Like that, one by one. But he combines everything into one. So you have to break it up to understand what he's saying. Okay, so we have already done the first part. If in fact we do not regard existence merely as a mechanic action of a brute and indifferent material force, he is talking of materialism. So if you are not a materialist, then you have to start with faith. Because if you are a materialist, you cannot have faith. That's why he's saying, if you are not a materialist, you have to start with a faith.
Now, what about this dash? I only see one dash.
Yeah. If we accept at all, he's saying. That's right. He's putting it there. Because sometimes you may not accept fully. Okay? The faith has to come if you accept. If you don't accept, the question of faith doesn't even arise. That's what it means. So, the first is the materialist eye. If you are not a materialist, or if original non-existence, the equally mechanical play of ideas and energies arising out of a original non-existence. The Buddhistic theory, the Mayavadan theory, that there is a featureless reality, you can call it non-existence, and it is creating temporary images or false images, okay, in the physical world. If you don't believe this, he is giving all the philosophies. If you don't believe this, if you don't believe this, you don't believe this, and you believe that God is responsible for everything in the physical world, then you have to start with the faith. Because if you don't have the faith, you will not believe that the divine has created suffering and evil. Okay? It's a little complicated because he combines so many different things. He is also mentioning, reflected in the passive soul of the passive soul. That's also this Sankhya philosophy or the Advaita philosophy also. Okay? This soul is passive and the physical world is active and throwing its images on the soul. So all these different ideas are there and you have to take it for granted, because even the Advaita philosophy also is sometimes, even the Mayavadan is part of the Vedanta. Okay, so because they admit the absolute reality of the Brahman, so which is unaffected by the dream and has no real part in it. If we accept at all, as the Gita accepts, the existence of God, and what is this God? He is explaining. That is to say, the omnipresent, omniscient, omnipotent. He has God, He is everywhere. We have a whole chapter in Life Divine, reality omnipresent. The divine presence is there everywhere here, hiding behind the forms. We don't see it, but that doesn't mean it's not there. It is there. Omnipresent, omniscient. He has all knowledge. Everything that is to be known, He knows. Omnipotent, full of power. Okay. Yet always transcendent being, who manifests the world and Himself in the world. So, transcendent being, experiencing the divine without the universe. Experiencing the divine only. When you experience the divine only, the world doesn't exist for you. That's a transcendent. Then you can experience the divine in the universe. That's what he's saying next. He's saying, who manifests the world and Himself in the world. So that's it. Cosmic, who is not the slave but the lord of his creative consciousness. He is not the slave at all, because man here is a slave of his body-mind life. But if you believe that he is not at the highest level, who is not the slave but the lord of his creative consciousness, and what is the creative consciousness? Chit Shakti. Shakti is the creative consciousness. You can call it nature, you can call it the divine mother, you can call it Prakriti, you can call it force, you can call it anything you want, but it is force. Nature or force. And this nature or force can take three poises. It can be seen as an illusion, Maya. It can be seen as mechanical energy, which is Prakriti. Or it can be seen as a divine power, Shakti. The chapter in the Life Divine. Brahman, Purusha, Ishvara, Maya, Prakriti, Shakti. So Maya is the illusion that you see when you go to the higher level of consciousness. Prakriti, mechanical unconscious action of nature in the physical world. Shakti, divine power. It's not unconscious, it's fully conscious and knows what it is doing. Who is not baffled and thwarted in his world conception or design by his creatures. Okay? By his creatures. His creatures, you are a creature, I am a creature, there are other, and we are not understanding him at all. He is not at all bothered about our ideas. He knows what he is doing. That's what it's.
And he says, man or devil.
And then that comes down to the religions. The devil is creating all these things. Okay, so man or devil, because there are many men also who have got these ideas. Na? We have discussed that. Manichaeanism, he has specifically focused on one. Mani was a 300 BC in Iran. He was a man who said that there is God and there is the opposite of God. And all the wrong things in the physical world are created by the opposite, not the God. So Manichaeanism is that. The reality is twofold, not single. Okay, so, not baffled or thwarted, who does not need to justify himself. He doesn't need to excuse himself and say, yes, there is evil in the world, there is suffering in the world. So he doesn't need to do that. Okay, by shifting the responsibility for any part of his creation or manifestation on that which is created, a difficult or manifested, then the human being has to start from a difficult act of faith. Swamdev is admitting that it's very difficult to understand suffering and evil and falsehood in the world, but if you have faith, your faith will carry you through and you will get the knowledge afterwards. He repeats this idea in many places in Life Divine also. Okay, so finding himself in a world which is apparently a chaos of battling powers, a clash of vast and obscure forces, a life which subsists only by constant change and death, menaced from every side by pain, suffering, evil, destruction. He has to see. Who is the he? The man who has faith. He has to see the omnipresent deity in all, in it all, and conscious that of this enigma there must be a solution, and beyond this ignorance in which he dwells, a knowledge that reconciles. He has to take his stand upon this faith. Though thou slay me, yet I will trust in thee. So this is what he's saying. So what is the enigma he's talking about? The enigma of suffering, pain, falsehood in the world. Okay, there must be a solution, and there is ignorance in the physical world. So surely there is a place where there is knowledge and no ignorance. You have to start with this faith. And a faith and a knowledge that reconciles. No more duality is there. He has to take his stand upon this faith. Though thou slay me, yet I will trust in thee. I believe that what we are seeing as suffering, destruction and all, there is surely an explanation to that, and it is a auspicious and good explanation and not something negative. So
my concern is that so many, even ashramites, are concerned with the negative.
Yes.
And that they want to do something.
Because it is human nature. Na? When you are in ignorance, you believe what you see. So the first thing that we have to develop is that I am in ignorance. My understanding of things is not right. So that humility should be there. And once you begin with that, then you ask for guidance, and then slowly the reality comes. We are always hasty in our judgment of things. All human thought and faith that is active and affirmative, there you are, not negative. All human thought or faith that is active and negative, because there is faith that is negative. Okay, the Mayavadin philosophy is negative, the Buddhistic philosophy is negative. Okay, the world has to be left, it is imperfect. It's a negative philosophy. But all the philosophy that is active, there is nothing wrong in the physical world. Everything you are seeing in the wrong way, but God has not created evil and suffering.
What about the atheist?
Yeah, the atheist is one who, the atheism is interesting. He is limiting himself to the material world, and he is saying that whatever my senses are telling me, I will believe. But there is an element of truth in that, but it is distorted. The element of truth is that I will not believe anything without convincing myself by experience. So, in the physical world, the experience is only through the senses.
And that was the basis of science for centuries.
That's right. But now science itself is discovering
Yes.
that there are worlds which are non-physical. So that's a good basis to start with. That's why I will not believe unless I have. See, in that case, materialism has eliminated all superstition and woolly thinking. Confused woolly thinking is omnipresent. Experience, find out the truth and believe in it. Test it out and believe. Don't go by preconceived ideas. So there is a truth in science, but it's too limited. Yeah. So, all human thought of faith that is active and affirmative, whether it be theistic, pantheistic or atheistic. So, theism is belief in a personal God, not the impersonal God. The impersonal God, Advaita and Vedanta normally speak of the impersonal God, a state of consciousness where there is peace, calm, maybe even Ananda, power, but nobody is there, no God. There is no God. It's a theistic. But theism is when you believe in a personal God who is like a king ruling his kingdom. That is theism. Pantheism. Pantheism is belief that the nature is God. The nature is divine. That is pantheism. And then you have atheism, which says that there is no ultimate reality, there is only the physical world that exists. So, whether it all human thought or faith that is active and affirmative, whether it is theistic, pantheistic or atheistic, does in fact involve more or less explicitly and completely such an attitude. Okay? They have a positive attitude, not a negative attitude. Even the atheism, he is calling it positive.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? He is accepting everything that is here in the physical world as real. You have to accept it as real, not as unreal or created by somebody else. It admits and believes. It admits and it believes. It admits the discords of the world, believes in some highest principle of God, universal being or nature, which shall enable us to transcend, overcome and harmonize these discords. So, when you are transcending, you are going beyond your body-mind life and going into the spiritual planes of consciousness. You are overcoming your suffering, your evil, you are overcoming. When you go into the spiritual planes of consciousness, it is possible to do that. Harmonizing these discords, that probably comes at a much higher level.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay? Perhaps even to do all three at once, to harmonize by overcoming and transcending. So when you overcome these difficulties and transcend, that is what Sri Aurobindo wants you to do. You transcend, but you overcome the difficulties in the physical world. Cancel all the negative aspects. So he is saying in brief in this paragraph that, in this para, that the Gita accepts that everything in the physical world, however undivine it may look, is really the divine. You have to begin with this faith, and then if you want really an explanation, you will get it, but you have to strive for it. You have to make an effort. Then, as to human life in its actualities, we have to accept its aspect of a struggle and a battle mounting into supreme crisis, such as that of Kurukshetra. The Gita, as we have seen, takes for its frame such a period of transition and crisis as humanity periodically experiences in its history, in which great forces clash together for a huge destruction and reconstruction, intellectual, social, moral, religious, political, and these in the actual psychological and social stage of human evolution culminate usually through a violent physical convulsion of strife, war or revolution. The Gita proceeds from the acceptance of the necessity in nature for such vehement crisis. And it accepts not only the moral aspect, the struggle between righteousness and unrighteousness, between the self-affirming law of good and the forces that oppose its progression, but also the physical aspect, the actual armed war or other vehement physical strife between the human beings who represent the antagonistic powers. We must remember that the Gita was composed at a time when war was even more than it is now a necessary part of human activity, and the idea of its elimination from the scheme of life would have been an absolute chimera. The gospel of universal peace and goodwill among men, for without a universal and entire mutual goodwill, there can be no real and abiding peace, has never succeeded. The gospel, I'm reading the sentence, the gospel of universal peace and goodwill among men has never succeeded for a moment in possessing itself of human life during the historic cycle of our progress, because morally, socially, spiritually, the race was not prepared, and the poise of nature in its evolution would not admit of its being immediately prepared for any such transcendence. Man has not yet reached a state of consciousness in which he can eliminate war. He is in the egoistic consciousness, and clash is bound to happen. Even now, we have not actually progressed beyond the feasibility of a system of accommodation between conflicting interests which may minimize the recurrence of the worst forms of strife. And towards this consummation, the method, the approach which humanity has been forced by its own nature to adopt is a monstrous mutual massacre, unparalleled in history, a universal war full of bitterness and irreconcilable hatred, is a straight way and the triumphant means modern man has found for the establishment of universal peace. He's saying,
When was
the
this?
war is the...
When was this written?
Huh?
When was this written?
In 1920, after the First World War.
After the First World War. Yeah. Yeah.
So that they speak very often of that. This is the war to end all wars.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so it doesn't work like that. Okay, that's what he's saying. That consummation, too, founded not upon any fundamental change in human nature, but upon intellectual notions, economic convenience, vital and sentimental shrinkings from the loss of life, discomfort and horror of war, affected by nothing better than political adjustments, gives no very certain promise of firm foundation and long duration. So what he's saying here is very interesting. He's saying that even the desire for peace is not the spiritual motive. It is simply convenience here. If I have war, I'm going to lose my house, I'm going to lose members of my family, so there should be no war. It's based on ego. That's what he's saying.
Economic convenience.
Yeah, and also I'll suffer loss.
Yeah.
That's why. So, that consummation too, founded not upon any fundamental change in human nature, nothing spiritual about it, but upon intellectual notions, economic, convenience, vital and sentimental shrinkings from loss of life, discomfort and horror of war, affected by nothing better than political adjustments, gives no very certain promise of firm foundation and long duration. So long as the motive for peace is wrong, you will never eliminate it. That's what he's saying. A day may come, must surely come, we will say, when humanity will be ready spiritually, morally, socially for the reign of universal peace. Meanwhile, the aspect of battle and the nature and function of man as a fighter have to be accepted and accounted for by any practical philosophy and religion. The Gita, taking life as it is and not only as it may be in some distant future, puts the question how this aspect and function of life, which is really an aspect and function of human activity in general, can be harmonized with the spiritual existence. So, so Gita is telling, let us find the real solution, not a solution for convenience and for to avoid inconveniences. That's not the attitude. How can we get real peace? That's what he's saying. Of course, you can find out how it is by getting rid of ego and rising to a level of consciousness where there is no desire, no attachments, and only the divine will rule, and that's a supramental plane. Even the spiritual planes will not be able to solve the problem. You have to go to the third level to be able to solve the problem of destruction in the world.
I think that's why Mother also said that the first supramental beings will be known by power rather than love.
Yeah.
Power has to be first to withstand everything that they will have to face.
We stop here today.
Yes. Thank you, Ranga. Namaste.